Arizona looks like the future: new homes, wide roads, endless development stretching into the desert, affordable prices compared to California, and a steady stream of people arriving every single year. From the outside, it feels like opportunity. But underneath that promise is a growing tension, one that most buyers don't see until it's too late. Because the risk in Arizona isn't just about house prices. It's not just about heat. And it's not even just about water. It's about how fast the state is growing, and what that growth is quietly ignoring. If you're thinking about buying a home in Arizona, if you already own one, or if you're just watching this boom from the outside, this video isn't about panic. It's about understanding where the real risks actually are, before they become unavoidable. Arizona isn't just growing. It's growing faster than its systems were designed to handle. Entire communities are being built at once, not over decades, but in just a few years. New suburbs appear almost overnight. New roads, new shopping centers, new housing tracts stretching miles into areas that were open desert not long ago. And this speed matters, because infrastructure, especially water infrastructure, is built on assumptions. Assumptions about population size, usage patterns, long-term supply, stability. Arizona's systems were designed for a much smaller state. And while officials often say, "We've planned for this," planning doesn't mean certainty. It means hoping that projections hold. The problem is, many of those projections are already being tested, and in some cases, quietly revised downward. When people think about water risk, they imagine taps running dry. That's not how this works. The real risk shows up in restrictions, rising costs, development limits, and uneven access. Most new developments don't rely on one single source. They rely on layers: groundwater pumping, stored water credits, Colorado River allocations. Imported water systems individually, these look stable. Together, they look resilient. But resilience only works if demand stays within expectations. Arizona's groundwater, especially in fast-growing outer suburbs, is being pumped faster than it can naturally recharge. In some areas, once that water's gone, it's gone permanently. And here's what buyers often don't realize. Many new homes are approved based on future water availability, not current surplus. That means your home may be legally approved today, based on water that hasn't been physically secured yet. Older parts of Arizona cities tend to have senior water rights, established infrastructure, political leverage. New developments don't. They sit at the edge. They depend on newer agreements. They rely more heavily on groundwater. And they're often the first to face restrictions when supply tightens. This doesn't mean those homes will become unlivable, but it does mean higher utility costs, stricter usage limits, potential resale pressure, insurance complications. And unlike older neighborhoods, new developments don't have decades of precedent behind them. They're experiments, scaled up very quickly. Water scarcity doesn't just affect taps. It affects everything connected to housing value. HOAs begin raising fees to manage landscaping restrictions. Cities pass costs onto residents through higher water bills. Insurance companies adjust risk models, not just for water, but for heat and infrastructure stress. And then there's resale psychology. Buyers don't just buy homes, they buy confidence. If uncertainty increases, even slowly, demand softens. Not everywhere at once, not dramatically, but unevenly. Some areas stay desirable, others stagnate, and new developments tend to feel that pressure first. So, why does Arizona keep approving growth? Because growth solves immediate problems. Tax revenue, housing shortages, political momentum, economic signaling. Saying no to development is difficult. It slows jobs, it raises prices, it angers voters. And once a growth model is in motion, stopping it becomes incredibly hard. Cities compete with each other. If one says no, another says yes. This creates a system where long-term sustainability becomes secondary to short-term momentum. Not because people are careless, but because the system rewards continuation. This isn't about avoiding Arizona. It's about being selective. Questions buyers should be asking: where does this community's water come from? How dependent is it on groundwater? How old is the surrounding infrastructure? How fast is this area growing compared to its water planning? The risk isn't uniform. Some places will adapt well, others will struggle quietly. The mistake is assuming all Arizona growth is equal. It isn't. Buying a home in Arizona looks straightforward. The listings are clean, the neighborhoods are new, the prices compared to California feel reasonable. But what buyers are actually purchasing isn't just a house. They're buying into a long-term water assumption, a planning framework that may change, and a system that doesn't fail loudly. It tightens quietly. Here's the part most buyers miss. When water becomes stressed, home values don't crash first. They stagnate. Resale slows. Insurance becomes harder to secure. Utility costs rise. HOA rules tighten. Suddenly, the home you plan to upgrade later becomes harder to exit. Not because it's unsafe, but because uncertainty scares buyers more than risk, and uncertainty is already creeping in. Water scarcity doesn't just affect taps, it affects financial confidence. Insurance companies don't wait for crisis, they price risk early. As water stress increases, insurers begin to ask, is this area defensible long-term? Are wildfire risks rising? Will infrastructure costs spike? When insurance gets more expensive or harder to obtain, lenders follow. That's how pressure travels. Water to insurance to mortgages to home values. Buyers don't see this on Zillow. They feel it years later, and by the time it's obvious, the approvals have already been signed. Older neighborhoods often have established infrastructure, priority water allocations, historical investment. New developments don't. They rely on future projections, untested supply strategies, and political confidence that rules won't change. That's why newer communities are more exposed. If restrictions come, they hit the newest growth first. Not because it's fair, but because it's easiest. This is how modern systems protect themselves. They sacrifice flexibility, not legacy. Let's be clear, Arizona isn't about to collapse. Homes won't suddenly be abandoned. The lights won't go out. That's not how this works. What happens instead is slower and harder to see. Growth becomes selective. Certain areas cool off. Others get expensive fast. The state keeps functioning, but the margin disappears. And when margins disappear, mistakes become permanent. Viewing a home is supposed to be a safe decision. For most people, it's the biggest financial commitment they'll ever make. It's not just money, it's stability, it's future plans. It's where people raise families, build routines, and assume permanence. And that's what makes Arizona's situation so uncomfortable. Because the risk here isn't obvious. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't look like a crisis when you're standing in a new suburb with fresh roads, clean sidewalks, and green landscaping. From the outside, everything looks normal. The houses are new, the infrastructure looks modern, the marketing promises long-term growth and opportunity. But underneath that surface is a system that depends on assumptions, not guarantees. Assumptions that water will remain affordable. Assumptions that infrastructure can keep expanding. Assumptions that today's conditions will still hold decades from now. And homebuyers are rarely told how fragile those assumptions really are. Most people don't buy homes based on long-term resource models. They buy based on interest rates, monthly payments, school districts, commute times. Water security is invisible until it isn't. By the time it shows up in higher bills, stricter limits, or insurance pullbacks, the decision has already been made. The mortgage is already signed. The equity is already tied to the system working. And that's the real risk. Not that Arizona suddenly runs out of water, but that life here becomes steadily more expensive, more restricted, and less predictable, in ways buyers didn't price in. What makes this especially difficult is that none of this feels urgent in the moment. There's no single breaking point, no dramatic cutoff, no announcement that says this place no longer works. Instead, it arrives gradually. Water costs rise a little. HOA rules tighten. Outdoor use is restricted permanently. Insurance premiums creep upward. New developments get pushed farther out. Commutes get longer. Infrastructure gets stretched thinner. Each change feels manageable on its own. But together, they change the math. And once the math changes, confidence starts to fade. Confidence is everything in real estate. Homes don't lose value because a system fails. They lose value when people stop believing the system will hold, when buyers hesitate, when lenders reassess risk, when insurers quietly adjust coverage, when investors move on to places with fewer unknowns. That's how decline actually begins, not with collapse, but with doubt. Arizona is still growing, people are still moving in, homes are still being built, but growth doesn't mean immunity. In fact, rapid growth often hides problems longer, because momentum keeps things moving even as margins shrink. And once margins disappear, systems become fragile. Fragile systems don't need disasters to fail, they just need pressure. This isn't about saying people shouldn't live in Arizona. Millions already do. Millions will continue to. It's about understanding that the risks here are changing, and they're not evenly shared. Large cities with money and infrastructure will adapt longer. Smaller towns will struggle sooner. Rural communities will feel the consequences first. New buyers will often absorb costs created long before they arrived. And the people making decisions today won't be the ones paying for most of the consequences tomorrow. If you're thinking about buying in Arizona, the takeaway isn't panic. It's awareness, understanding where water comes from, understanding what backs the promises, understanding which risks are structural, not temporary. Because once a home is built, the system it depends on doesn't get easier to fix. It gets harder. You can't move rivers. You can't refill aquifers quickly. And you can't redesign growth models overnight. Arizona isn't alone in this. It's one of the first places where the limits are becoming visible. But other fast-growing regions are following similar paths. That's why what happens here matters. Not as a warning of collapse, but as a case study in how modern growth quietly runs into physical limits. Limits that don't care about optimism, or politics, or projections, only math. And once that math stops working, no amount of development, no amount of confidence, no amount of belief can bring the water back.